believe in curses? Can someone's suffering be so great, the pain they felt so powerful, that their last wish before they were forced to leave behind a part of themselves comes true? In today's video, we'll be exploring two such stories. Mysteries surrounding two historical places. Call them myths or old wives' tales. Or believe that these events I'm talking about today actually did happen. Maybe there is some truth behind their tales. I will give you all the facts I have and then leave the judgments to you. Make up your own mind one way or the other. To be honest, this is my fourth attempt at recording this video. I did my research and wrote down all the points I wanted to touch upon. But when I went through the clips I had recorded, it worried me that it was more confusing than informative, especially if you're not familiar with India's history and geography. If I go into too much details to make it easier for the listener, we will be here for days. Contemplated not posting at all. But these stories fascinate me. So there is a chance some of you may even like it. I'll post a few links in the description below if you want to learn more about these events. And I'll go back to my regular true crime videos next week. For today's episode, we are traveling far into the past. A past where India was still the land of Maharajas. There are two mysterious places that once were home to simple yet hard-working people, now stand as cursed, barren, abandoned land, only showing the desolation that those people who cursed it might have felt at one point. They still stand, bearing witness to things that transpired around them. A world that changed, people moved on, but these places stayed still, crumbling around the edges or buried in sand. A curse so powerful that to this day it still haunts one of the most prominent royal families in India, 400 years and 19 generations on. For our first story, I'm taking you to the south of India, to the palatial city of Mysuru, situated at the foothills of Chamundi. It is the seat of the Wadiyar dynasty and was the capital of the kingdom of Mysore for almost 6 centuries, from 1399 until 1947. To this day, the royal family still lives in one part of the palace. Though monarchy and the titles are abolished in India, Mysore still has a Maharaja. Of course, they do not run the state or collect taxes today. The title is only symbolic now, but they still do take part in public ceremonies and events. Mysuru initially served as a vassal state of the Vijayanagara Empire. With the decline of that empire in 1565, the Mysuru kingdom gradually achieved independence. And by the time of King Narasaraja Wadiyar in 1637, it had become a sovereign state. Srirangapatna, near Mysuru, was the capital of the kingdom beginning in 1610. And this is where our first story takes place. 400 years ago in 1610. Srirangapatna was the capital of declining Vijayanagara Empire, headed by Tirumala Raja. He was afflicted with a terminal illness. His queen was a young woman named Alamelamma. She came from a village called Malangi on the bank of river Kaveri, not too far from the capital. Due to his ill health and the relentless Wadiyar army, Tirumala Raja had lost control of most of his kingdom, and the last to fall was his capital Srirangapatna. Tirumala Raja left his capital and travelled to Malangi, his wife's birthplace, with Alamelamma. When he was there, someone suggested he seeks the blessings from a temple in Talakadu, which is located on the opposite bank of river Kaveri. Since they had exhausted all other measures, Tirumala Raja thought the divine blessing was the only thing that might save him. So he travelled to Talakadu. But unfortunately, he did not survive. Within 3 days of reaching Talakadu, he breathed his last. The young Alamelamma, who had already lost her kingdom, now lost her husband. Having been married only for a short time, they did not have any children. Alamelamma had to have suffered a great deal. She went from being a queen consort to a fugitive widow in a short span of time. She was a proud woman as a consequence of her birth and station in life. She was also an ardent devotee of goddess Ranganayaki. After her life changed overnight, she spent all her time and energy in divine pursuits. Alamelamma was the owner of a vast collection of priceless jewelry. After she became a widow, she was forbidden from wearing those herself. So she took to lending her jewelry to Ranganayaki temple in Srirangapatna. The priests would decorate the idol with all the priceless items, and after the puja was complete, they would return the jewelry to Alamelamma's possession. Raja Wadiyar, who was the leader of Wadiyar dynasty at the time, came to know about Alamelamma's collection of jewelry and he wanted them for himself. He thought he was now the king of Srirangapatna, so was the rightful owner of these jewels. So he sent his soldiers to fetch the jewelry from Alamelamma's possession. She, of course, refused. She couldn't abide the thought of parting from last of her belongings, a part that connected her to her past. Also, it was her intention to keep the jewelry exclusively for the use of temple, so she refused to give it away. This angered Raja Wadiyar. This time, he sent a small army to retrieve the jewelry, by force if necessary. And also, he gave orders for Alamelamma's arrest. When she saw the king's soldiers approaching her abode, she knew that there was no escape this time. So she wrapped all her jewels in a cloth and made a run for the nearby cliff, soldiers chasing behind her. When she reached the edge of the cliff, she whirled around, her face a mask of fury and disgust and desperation. She uttered a curse that haunts the Wadiyar dynasty till today. Talakadu maralagi, malangi maduವಾಗಿ, Mysuru ಒಡೆಯರಿಗೆ ಮಕ್ಕಳಾಗದಿರಲಿ. When translated, it meant, may Talakadu turn into a barren expanse of sand. May Malangi turn into a whirlpool. May the Wadiyars of Mysore not have children for eternity. She is said to have chanted these lines as she took the leap to her death. King's soldiers were stunned, rooted to the spot. They had not foreseen an event like this. In their eyes, Alamelamma was a helpless female with no one to protect her. So when she turned around and jumped off the cliff, clutching the cloth filled with jewels into the river below, they were not prepared. Before they could reach her, she was swept away by the strong currents of river Kaveri. When they relayed the news to the king, he was distraught. Just like his soldiers had, he underestimated Alamelamma's determination and her strength. He repented his actions, cursed his greed which made him do the unthinkable, and had his priests install a golden statue of Alamelamma in his palace as a sign of repentance. Now let's break down Alamelamma's curse. May Talakadu turn into a barren expanse of sand. Once upon a time, Talakadu had been the capital of different empires and was known as the temple town, hosting over 30 temples. After Alamelamma's curse, Talakadu gradually became completely covered by sand, burying the ancient temples in sand dunes. Now the government of India is trying to excavate the ancient city to expose these temples. Some of the bigger temples have already been unearthed, but there are still more than half of the town still buried deep in sand. Second part of the curse, may Malangi turn into a whirlpool. As for Malangi, the Kaveri river has been changing its course, causing eroding of Malangi due to whirlpools. This has forced Malangi to keep relocating away from the riverbank, and its once flourishing population has dwindled. They have also had to change its name, some say to ward off the curse. Third and most powerful part of the curse, which cannot be explained away with scientific reasons. At the time of the curse, Raja Wadiyar had 4 sons. Soon after the curse, 3 of his sons, including his eldest son and heir, died. Heartbroken, the king retired from his kingdom in Mysuru. Raja Wadiyar's eldest grandson, who was next in line to the throne, was crowned as the king. This king failed to produce a son. So he adopted the sole living son of his grandfather Raja Wadiyar, that is his own paternal uncle. This paternal uncle, once he became the king, was assassinated within a year. That ended the bloodline of the greedy Raja Wadiyar, who had taken Alamelamma's kingdom and her jewelry. There is more. More than 400 years later, in Wadiyar dynasty, natural-born princes have not had children, except in 4 instances. 2 kings had sons who died as children. Once a king had a son, but he was unable to speak. Later, this son became the king, and he had a son. Other than in these 4 instances, the kings who are born as princes have not had children. These childless kings have adopted children of their relatives. The adopted sons have later become kings, and these kings have borne male children. Hence, the alternate generations of kings have borne children, meaning the natural-born princes were childless and had to adopt, and those adopted children who became kings had sons, thus ensuring the same bloodline never ruled for long. In fact, the current king, Yaduvir Vodayar, is the distant nephew of the last king Srikantadatta Vodayar, who died childless at the age of 60 on 10th December 2013. He was a natural-born prince who became the king. He and his wife did not have children, and they did not adopt a child because Srikantadatta didn't believe in the curse. But after his death, his wife, Queen Pramoda Devi, adopted an adult relative on 23rd February 2015. And on May 28, 2015, he was crowned the king. Now, he is married to the royal princess from Rajasthan and has a son named Adyavir Vodayar. All of this is such a big deal because the kings and monarchs around the world pride themselves in how strong their bloodline is. The king failed to produce a son. It made him appear weak in front of his people. And it also ensured an unrest among his own family, as the relatives would conspire to get their own children crowned as adopted heirs, kind of creating a Game of Thrones-esque situation. From then on to this day, the Vodayars worship Alamelamma as a goddess, asking for her forgiveness. Today's second story comes from a village named Kuldhara, 18 kilometers away from the popular tourist city of Jaisalmer, Rajasthan. It was a small but peaceful home to Paliwal Brahmins. Paliwal Brahmins have a history that goes back to 6,000 years. They were traditionally a community that excelled in business and agriculture, and they have their origins in a town in Rajasthan named Pali. A little background information which may help you understand the story better. In Indian caste system, Brahmins are considered as the top layer and usually maintain a close-knit community, especially when it comes to marriages. They consider it distasteful to marry outside the community. And in the times that we are talking about, customs would have been even more rigid. Marrying or having a relationship outside the community would mean that the person and their family would be an outcast. Now moving on to the story. In 1815, Jaisalmer was the capital of Rajasthan, and its Diwan, meaning Prime Minister, was a man named Salim Singh. Salim Singh was known as a cruel, cold-blooded minister. And on one of his visits to Kuldhara, he saw the 16-year-old daughter of the village chief. She was said to have been exceptionally beautiful. Salim Singh decided he wanted her for himself. He was an already married man and had a reputation for being ruthless. Village chief was not going to hand over his daughter to a tyrant like him, but he also had to think about his community. The chief was in a very difficult situation. He knew if he refused to give his daughter to him, the minister would make their life a living hell. And most likely, he would take the girl by force, and she would not be treated well under such circumstances. And if they fled from the village, then the rest of Paliwal community left behind would be in deep trouble. The minister would make an example out of them for helping the chief and his daughter. So they decided the whole community would flee all at once. And one night, the entire Paliwal community gathered their belongings and left Kuldhara. Not a single family stayed behind. To escape detection, they scattered all around neighboring states. They didn't want to make the mistake of staying together in one place, which would again paint a target on their back. Instead, they found it safer to integrate themselves with other communities, hence breaking up the once united Paliwal sect. When the minister sent his messenger to get the girl, they found the village completely deserted. And the legend says that in their grief of having to leave behind their homes and livelihood and everything dear to them, Paliwal Brahmins put a curse on the village that no one will ever be able to make life in Kuldhara ever again. If they tried, they would never prosper. Kuldhara has stood empty after that. People say that there were those who tried to make a life in the abandoned village, but it never worked out for them. Some people also say that the village is now haunted and they have experienced paranormal activities during the night. But there are others who say that these are just rumors, made-up stories. The place has stood silent for so long, bearing witness to those who lived there and had to leave because of circumstances. Now crumbling walls of these once prosperous and lively homes where people lived tell a story of what once was. Both Kuldhara and Talakadu are tourist spots these days. Tragic stories behind them attract thousands of tourists each year. That brings an end to today's mystery episode. Two very different stories from different parts of India. But what unites them is the ill effects of greed of powerful men on those they ruled over. It also shows why roles of kings and queens, monarchy in general, was rejected by people all over the world. When all the power is in the hands of one individual, it never ends well for those who are less fortunate. There are, of course, scientific explanations to most of these events I talked about today. But how do you explain the curse on a prominent royal family or an abandoned village in the middle of a famous tourist town brimming with people? What are your thoughts on these mysteries? Let me know in the comments below. As always, please do like, share, and subscribe. Until next time.